Hello there YouTubes, slightly different video today. I'm going to do valve clearances on the trusty rusty RS. I have done them a couple of times since I got the bike. Once because I took the cam cover off, not the cam cover, the cam carrier off, so I need to readjust the valve clearances when I bolted that down, and once before I rode it back from the Lake District. So it has done, what have I done on it? 1,253 miles. So I'm just going to give them a quick check, just make sure they're okay, and this is just designed as a quick walkthrough. I will be using the trusty Haynes manual. Now anybody with an old bike will know Haynes manuals. These things are superb. They are generally reliable for what they say you need to do, and this is obviously the 250RS one. Everything from routine maintenance to engine rebuilds. You can see how old it is, look. It's telling you to refill it with Castrol Grand Prix oil. Fantastic. So, when we get through, where are we? Routine maintenance. Checking and adjusting the valve clearances. So I will be using this, just so that I make sure that I don't make any errors in describing what you need to do. As I say, I've done it a few times before anyway. But I want to make sure that I get everything spot on, because if someone does use this guide, I want it to be right. And obviously if it's not right, or if someone spots something they think could be better, chuck it in the comments, because then that can help everybody. So first things first, it's going to be remove the seat. You've got a 12mm bolt there, and the same on the other side, same position. Once the seat is off, there is a 12mm for the tank. To remove the tank, before you remove the tank, remove the side panels. You've got 3 lugs. You've got one here, and one there. These side panels are old, don't forget, so pull in the area of the lugs just so you're not stressing anything, and they should come off fine. And obviously don't forget to switch off and remove your fuel pipe. Once that's done, you'll then have the bike ready to do the valve clearances. So I'm going to do that now. I'm not going to film it, but if you can't take the side panels and tank off of a bike and the seat off of a bike, you shouldn't be doing valve clearances. So that's how they come off. Happy days, back in a sec. So now we've got the tank off, obviously seat and side panels off. There's your valve inspection covers, held in place by 4 8mm nuts. Now always give it a bit of a clean, and if you've got a loose brush, just give it a brush over and a quick blow with some compressed air or whatever you've got, just so that when you lift those inspection covers off, you're not going to get muck falling off of the bike into the motor, because you really don't want to be doing that. So next job is to remove the 2 valve inspection covers, exhaust side, inlet side, and then on the crankcase cover here we've got 2 bungs to remove. The center bung, which will reveal a bolt on the end of the crankshaft so you can rotate the engine, and this inspection cover where you'll be able to see the T mark on the flywheel, which will line up with a mark on the inside of the case. Also pull the spark plug out, because that's going to make your life an awful lot easier to turn the motor over. So that's the 3 things. 1 2 3 4 5, let's call it 5 things. That's the 5 things I'm going to do now. Obviously you can probably see on these have got a bit of damage. I'm suggesting that the 30 odd years of it being in a garage, they probably seized in place, so might get a bit creative to get those undone when he was refurbing the top end of the motor. So I may replace these with some fresh ones at some point, but that's the next job. So give it an extra clean and then pull those bits off. Tools you need for the job are, in no particular order, ratchet and 12mm socket. That's to take off the seat and the tank. Obviously you're going to need a pair of pliers or something to remove the fuel tap, but obviously it depends on how your fitting is, whether it's a spring fitting or you need to unscrew a clamp, but obviously you should be able to work that out. 18mm plug socket to remove the spark plug, a 17mm socket to rotate the crankshaft, 10mm for the valve covers. If I call them 8mm, that's my fault, they're definitely 10mm. And then this is a little tool you can purchase, which just makes adjusting the valve clearances on the screw and lock nuts a lot easier. What you've got is a external 8mm and an internal square head for the valves. I'll show you how that works when I get to it, and a torch. That's going to make life easier just for looking into the cases to make sure that you've rotated the motor in the right position. So that's the basic tools you're going to need. Right, that's the covers removed. You've got the plugs for the timing mark and the crank, and then you've got your valve covers. Valve covers are, I try and keep them in the same order, just so they go back on where they came off. So that's my rear, that's my front. These are held in place obviously with the two 10mm and an O-ring at the base to seal the oil. If you need new O-rings, you get from David Silver's. They're not that expensive. I think they're about a tenner, something like that, but it's worth it obviously. Then if I can put a bit of light on it, you've got your crank plug, crank bolt, which is in the center there, and then you've got your timing mark, which is in there. Now I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. You are looking for a line with a T, and it lines up with the slot that's in the top of that case. So I don't know whether you can see that or not. Now when you rotate the crank, you are rotating it anti-clockwise. Okay, that's the way you are going to go. And when the T mark is aligned, you're looking for top dead center with all the valves being closed. That means none of the valves are depressed. And if you look inside the cylinder, you should better see the top of the piston, which you can. Now what I generally tend to do is rotate the motor until I see the inlet valves, which are obviously the carb size, see the inlet valves depress, because that's telling you it's on the inlet stroke. Then as the cam rotates and the valves close, I then look for the T mark, and that means basically your inlet stroke has happened, it's drawn the fuel in, and it's going up to the compression stroke, which is where you want the motor on compression with all the valves closed to adjust them. So that's the point we're at the moment. The T mark is lined up with the groove at the top of the case, and we're ready to go to check the valve clearances. So we move on to that now. Obviously I've got the tools there. I like putting stuff on paper, just keeps it clean, and it means you're not putting any muck that's off the floor into the motor. Now I'll get the feeler gauge ready in a second. I'll give you the settings of what they should be, inlet and exhaust, because they're normally different, and I'll show you how to check the clearances. Valve clearances according to, sorry about the shadows, the trusty Haynes manual. Inlet 0.05 or 2 thou, exhaust 0.1 or 4 thou. That's with a cold engine. You always set valve clearances with a cold engine. Here are my feeler gauges. Now you can see the tips are bent over. Now you can buy feeler gauges pre-bent. I've just bent mine because you'll see in a second it makes it a lot easier to check the clearances. Now I'm going to show you the exhaust setting because that's easier to film. Basically it's easy to get to and it's easier to film. So I'll show you the exhaust. It is identical method for the inlet, it's just a bit trickier to get to. So without further ado, Right, I'll put a bit of light on so hopefully we can see what's going on. So inside the motor you have got a camshaft which runs in there. Then you've got your valves and tappets which are here. That is your screw and lock nut adjuster. That's the lock nut. As you can see, it's a nut. The adjuster that you screw up and down is the top part. You can see it's got a square head on it. Now you can see, if I showed you the tool earlier, which I did, you can see how the adjuster, the tool, you can slacken the lock nut off, adjust the valve, and then retighten the lock nut. Now, between the valve, which is there, with the spring underneath it, the top of the valve and the adjuster, there is a gap. It is just in there, and that is where you want to place your feeler gauge, and that is where you take a reading. So feeler gauge goes in there and you take a reading, and as you can see, that is 0.1. that just goes in. Let's just feel it. That is actually, that's a nice clearance. Okay, 0.1 of a millimetre. That is your exhaust valves. Now you have two valves because it's a 4-cylinder, so you have one valve there and one valve there. Obviously you need to check the clearances for both, so I'm going to check the clearances on the other valve, but I'm happy with the valve that I've just checked on the right hand side. It's a nice sliding fit, which is what you want. I would always run a valve slightly loose than slightly tight. If you're having to try and squeeze a feeler gauge in, then that is too tight. You can just back it off slightly and adjust it. So let me check the rest of the valves and I'll be back in just a second. Right, all the valves are in spec. So what I'm going to try and do is show you how the adjuster tool works. If you can see the square head in the end of the adjuster, and obviously the 8mm spanner, if you want to call it that, on the outside. So if I try and come around here, obviously you pop your feeler gauge in, and that is a nice fit there. If it wasn't, what you would do is place the tool on the top of the lock nut. You would then slacken the lock nut off. I will slacken it off, holding the top. Get that back on. You would slacken it off, then you would adjust the valve, screw the tappet as necessary, and then holding on to it, you would nip it back up, and then you would recheck the valve clearance. Oh, look at that. Yep, got that back where it was. And then I always just pop it back on. And then give it a final nip up. And there we go. That is a valve clearance. I hope that makes sense, and obviously if you couldn't see that, I do apologise. I tried to get a bit of light on there and try to show you what it does. So I hope that makes sense. So that's all 4 valves checked. A quick show of how you adjust it. Now what you would then do, once you've done that, is pop down, just get the light out of the way, pop down to the decompressor. And what you're looking for, slack play, is you're looking for 2 to 3mm of slack play on the decompressor. Now I haven't measured it, but that's not far out. If you need to adjust it, there's your adjusters at the top. You just adjust that till you've got the right amount of free play in the cable. If you pull the cable out, you could probably mark it and measure it. That might be a little bit slack actually, so I might nip that up, but all that does is just decompress the motor. It's just spinning it over, and it's not exactly difficult to turn over anyway. So I may leave that. Right then, covers back on. That's valve inspection covers back on. You only need to nip these bolts up. You don't need to wang them down tight, because obviously you've got an O-ring. It's not a gasket. The O-rings will compress, they will seal it, so they just need to be nipped down. I don't know the torque setting off by heart, but obviously just experience shows me how to do it. I have noticed I've got a crack in my ignition coil. I'm going to need to source a coil at some point, because that's not good. That will cause an issue. Plugs for the case are back in, and then while I'm at it, spark plug. Have a look at the colour. You're looking for something, they used to call it rich tea, you know, rich tea biscuits, rich tea brown, but that is a lovely colour at the moment. That's running nicely, so I'm going to pop that back in. There is already a bit of copper grease on the thread, so I'm not going to put any more on. While I'm here, obviously you can have a look at all the cables, make sure you've got nothing frayed, make sure that everything's routed correctly and it's in the right place, and it all looks good. Obviously there's your oil drain, you just seen that in the last video, and I will go over it now and just check chain tension. It had a new oil filter, had a new air filter recently, which I got from David Silver's. They are washable, but if you buy a new Honda Element, it comes ready oiled, so you can just pop it over the cage, slide it in place with a little spring clip. In fact, there we go, I'm already on the manual page because I'm on the maintenance page. Goes on with a spring clip, and it will give you there's another picture of screw and lock nut, but obviously their version, they use a little spanner, or two spanners, 8mm spanner and a further spanner, rather than the single tool that I've got. So close about a decompressor. There's a little plastic cover on there to check your brake pad wear, and luckily, look at that, the cover's still on there. Thing of beauty, eh? But I have had the caliper apart, and that is all nice. I will just give a spin around the spokes, check the tyres, lube up anything that needs doing, check the free play on things like the throttle cable and the clutch lever to make sure that they're all as they should be and all the covers are in place. Head bearings and everything are all good. Then just give it a once over, and that's the maintenance done for a little while on the trusty rusty RS. Thing of beauty that it is. So I hope you found the quick valve lesson. Do you want to call it a lesson? It's probably not a lesson, is it? Valve instruction. I'll waffle while I wipe the plug back in. Hope you found that useful. Obviously the final stages would be to refit the fuel tank. Bear with me while I pull the socket off the ratchet one-handed. That just needs nipping up slowly. Apologies, my wife popped down to see if I wanted anything, which is very lovely of her, and then she went off when she realised that she was interrupting me doing my filming. So that's the plug just nipped up. Again, that doesn't need to be tight. Plug cap back on. Genuine plug cap, 43 years old, and it still seals perfectly, so that's not being changed. However, the coil will be changed because that does have a crack. So I'll be looking at David Silver, seeing how much they are new, because why not? If they are a horrific price, because they are just a 12-volt coil, if they are a horrific price, then I might look at eBay and see what's kicking about. But this thing does deserve proper stuff. So tank back on, side panels back on, seat back on, reconnect the fuel, and we're ready to go. Hope you found that useful. If you've got any questions, or if you've got any suggestions about what could be done better or easier or better tools or anything like that, then post them, because these you know, RS channels and all that sort of stuff, they're about spreading the knowledge amongst the owners and keeping these things on the road. So if I've missed something, or there is something that I could have done better, let me know, because every day is a school day and we should all be obviously willing to learn as we go, because that's how I learn from other people. Hopefully people have learned from me, but you never stop learning. So if you've got any better suggestions, chuck them in the comments. Cheers all, I'll see you for the next adventure for RSing about.